Listen carefully because this is where most men get it wrong. Women don't chase confidence. They've seen confidence everywhere: loud, performative, exaggerated, and often hollow. What they respond to, what stays with them long after a man is gone, is something far rarer: certainty, quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that doesn't need to be proven, defended, or explained. Confidence is often external. It rises and falls with validation, attention, and outcomes. Certainty is internal. It is rooted, stable, unmoved by approval or rejection. A confident man wants to be seen a certain way. A certain man already knows who he is. And that difference changes everything. When a woman encounters a man with real certainty, something subtle but powerful happens. She feels it before she understands it. There's no pressure, no performance, no need for him to impress. His presence is calm. His energy is settled. He isn't trying to become someone in front of her. He already is someone. This is why some men are unforgettable without ever trying to be. Not because they said the right things or followed the right strategies, but because they were solid in themselves. Today, we're going to break down exactly what that certainty is, how it shows up in real life, and why women never forget the man who possesses it. Most men believe women remember men for obvious reasons: looks, status, money, charm, or confidence. But that's not how memory works. Women don't remember men for what they had. They remember men for how they felt in their presence. And that feeling is almost always emotional, not logical. A man becomes memorable when his presence creates a sense of clarity and stability. Not excitement alone, not drama, but groundedness. When a man knows who he is and doesn't shift himself to gain approval, the interaction feels different. There's no confusion, no emotional pressure, no sense that he's trying to extract something from her. That absence of need creates impact. Most men are forgotten because they blend together. They mirror opinions. They adjust personalities. They say what they think will be liked. Over time, this creates a sameness that disappears from memory. There's nothing distinct to hold on to. But when a woman meets a man who is internally consistent, whose words, actions, and energy align, her nervous system registers it. She may not label it, but she feels safe, intrigued, and alert. That's why remembrance isn't a choice, it's a response. And that response is triggered by authenticity, certainty, and emotional coherence, qualities most men never develop and women rarely encounter. Most men misunderstand what it actually means to know yourself. They assume self-knowledge looks like dominance, loud opinions, or constant self-assertion. In reality, that behavior usually signals insecurity, not strength. Arrogance is noisy because it needs resistance. True self-knowledge is quiet because it doesn't. A man who genuinely knows himself doesn't argue to be right. He doesn't over-explain his choices. He doesn't feel threatened when others disagree. He understands his values, his limits, and his direction. And that understanding doesn't require an audience. It lives inside him, steady and unquestioned. Think of it like a foundation beneath a house. You don't see it, but everything depends on it. When the foundation is solid, the structure doesn't shake when pressure is applied. The same is true for a man with real self-knowledge. External opinions don't move him because his identity isn't borrowed from others. Women sense this immediately, not intellectually, but emotionally. There's a calm confidence in a man who doesn't need to posture or perform. His presence feels grounded, safe, distinct. He isn't trying to convince her of his worth. He already lives it. And that quiet certainty creates attraction without effort because it signals something rare: inner stability in a world full of noise. A man who knows himself lives by values, not convenience. This doesn't mean he's rigid, difficult, or closed-minded. It means he has taken the time to examine his life and decide what actually matters to him. Once that decision is made, his actions align naturally. There's no inner conflict, no constant second-guessing. Living by values shows up in simple but powerful ways. He says yes to what aligns with him and no to what doesn't, without guilt, without over-explaining, and without seeking approval. Not because he wants to control situations, but because he respects himself enough to be honest. His boundaries are clear, calm, and consistent. Women notice this immediately because most men don't operate this way. Many shift their opinions depending on who they're with. They soften their standards to avoid discomfort. They change themselves to be liked. Over time, this creates emotional instability. When a woman encounters a man who remains the same regardless of environment, something registers. His energy doesn't fluctuate. His decisions don't feel reactive. He's predictable in the best sense, reliable, grounded, and real. That consistency creates trust, and trust creates memorability, not because he tried to stand out, but because he refused to abandon himself for approval. Most men spend their entire lives performing. They perform competence at work, confidence around other men, and desirability around women. Every interaction becomes an audition. Every moment carries the quiet pressure of trying to be perceived the right way. Over time, this creates exhaustion, and women feel it immediately. Performance has a distinct emotional signature. It feels tense. It feels rehearsed. It feels like effort. Even when a man says the right things, something underneath feels off, because his energy is split between being present and managing how he's being seen. The man who stops performing stands out instantly, not because he's flawless, but because he's honest. He no longer tries to present a curated version of himself. He allows his strengths, flaws, limits, and uncertainty to exist without apology. That authenticity creates emotional ease. In a world where almost everyone is pretending, realness is rare, and rarity creates value. When a woman meets a man who isn't trying to win her approval, she feels relief. There's nothing to push against, nothing to manage, nothing to decode. This is why authenticity is powerful, not because it's impressive, but because it's grounded. The man who has ended the performance doesn't chase validation. He offers presence. And that presence is deeply memorable because it feels honest, human, and unforced. Authenticity is not a skill you can practice or a technique you can apply. The moment a man approaches it as something to use, it disappears. Real authenticity isn't strategic. It's a byproduct of living honestly. That's why so many men fail when they try to imitate it. You can study body language, conversation patterns, or psychological frameworks, but none of that creates authenticity. At best, it creates a more convincing performance. And women are remarkably sensitive to that difference. They can feel when a man is being real versus when he's trying to appear real. Authenticity is discovered through action, through choices, through how a man lives when no one is watching. It comes from taking responsibility for your life, making decisions aligned with your values, and accepting the consequences of those decisions without blame or excuse. This leads to an uncomfortable but necessary question. What are you actually doing with your life right now? Not what you plan to do, not what you talk about. What are you building? What are you moving toward? Direction creates substance. Substance creates authenticity. A man who is actively living his life, imperfectly but intentionally, doesn't need to perform authenticity. It shows naturally. And that natural presence is something women remember because it's rare and unmistakable. Purpose doesn't mean having everything figured out. It doesn't require fame, wealth, or extraordinary ambition. Purpose simply means movement towards something meaningful. A man with direction may not know his final destination, but he knows he's not standing still, and that distinction matters. Women are highly attuned to whether a man is building or drifting. Drifting men react to life. They wait. They hope. They move only when pushed by circumstances or other people. Builders move with intention. Even when progress is slow, there is momentum. Even when resources are limited, there is direction. A man with purpose wakes up with something pulling him forward. His energy is engaged. His attention is focused. He's not looking to someone else to give his life meaning. He's creating it himself. This independence is powerful because it removes emotional pressure from relationships. Importantly, purpose is not about being impressive. A modest job, small goals, or local impact can still carry deep meaning. What matters is commitment, consistency, forward motion. A man who keeps moving despite setbacks signals resilience and self-belief. Women remember this man because he feels alive, not restless, not desperate, alive. His presence carries weight because his life has direction. and direction creates gravity, drawing people in without effort or force. Self-respect is not arrogance, superiority, or ego. It's something far simpler and far more powerful, treating yourself like you matter. Most men don't do this. They sacrifice their own well-being for approval. They abandon their standards for comfort. They trade long-term growth for short-term relief. And over time, this quiet self-betrayal becomes visible. A man without self-respect negotiates himself away. He tolerates behavior he shouldn't. He accepts situations that drain him. He ignores his health, wastes his time, and lowers his expectations because part of him doesn't believe he's worth the effort. Women sense this immediately, not consciously, but emotionally. It shows in posture, decisions, boundaries, and energy. A man with self-respect moves differently. He doesn't need to announce his worth. He demonstrates it through how he lives. He takes care of his body because he values it. He protects his time because he understands it's finite. He maintains his standards because they define the quality of his life. This kind of man feels solid, grounded, reliable, not because he's controlling, but because he has a center. Women remember him because he represents stability in a world where so many men are fragmented, inconsistent, and easily swayed. Self-respect is the foundation everything else stands on, and without it, nothing holds. Self-respect is revealed through behavior, not words. It shows up in small, consistent actions that signal clarity and intention. A man with self-respect is fully present when he's with a woman, not distracted, not divided, not constantly seeking external stimulation. His attention is deliberate because he understands its value. He doesn't rush to please or overextend himself. He shows interest without chasing. He listens without losing himself. He brings his perspective into the interaction instead of molding himself to fit hers. He is open, but he is not empty. There is substance behind his presence. Importantly, he doesn't pursue endlessly. He offers himself honestly and allows the outcome to unfold. There's no pressure to convince, impress, or perform. This creates emotional space, something most interactions lack. Women feel the difference immediately. This isn't indifference, it's intention. He cares, but he's not dependent. He's engaged, but not attached to validation. That balance is rare. Most women have experienced men who try too hard, explain too much, or abandon themselves to be chosen. When they meet a man who simply shows up as himself, calm, grounded, and self-respecting, it stands out. Not loudly, but deeply. And that depth is what makes him unforgettable. At the core of everything we've discussed is something deeper, masculine grounding. This has nothing to do with aggression, control, or dominance. True masculine grounding is about stability, clarity, and being rooted in who you are. It's the ability to remain steady regardless of external pressure. Many men lose this grounding early in life. They learn to adjust constantly, to please, to soften, to adapt to expectations placed on them by society, peers, or relationships. Over time, this creates men who are reactive rather than intentional, men whose sense of self depends on approval and circumstances. A grounded man is different. He has an internal center. His mood isn't dictated by how others respond to him. His values don't change based on convenience. His presence feels calm because he's not internally conflicted. There's alignment between who he is and how he lives. Women feel this grounding immediately. It creates a sense of emotional safety. Not because the man is predictable in behavior, but because he is consistent in character. He doesn't shift to gain favor. He doesn't disappear under pressure. He remains present. This kind of masculinity is magnetic because it's rare. It signals strength without force and confidence without noise. A grounded man doesn't need to dominate a room. His stability speaks for itself. And that quiet strength is something women remember long after the interaction ends. One of the rarest qualities in a man is the ability to hold strength and openness at the same time. Most men swing between two extremes. They either try to dominate, forcing their opinions, controlling situations, refusing vulnerability, or they collapse, becoming passive, agreeable, and uncertain. Both come from insecurity. A grounded man lives in the middle. He doesn't argue to prove himself. He states his position calmly and allows others to disagree. He doesn't need to win every conversation because his sense of self isn't at stake. This is strength without force. At the same time, he's capable of vulnerability. He can admit when he's wrong. He can ask for help. He can express uncertainty in areas that don't define his core values. This isn't weakness, it's honesty, and honesty requires courage. Women rarely encounter men like this. Most either pressure them or disappear emotionally. The grounded man does neither. He listens without trying to fix. He holds space without losing himself. He remains present without becoming dependent. This balance creates deep trust. Not because the man is perfect, but because he's real and consistent. And that combination, clarity, humility, and steadiness, is what makes him unforgettable. It's important to be clear about something. None of this is about trying to attract women. The moment this becomes about strategy, tactics, or outcomes, its power disappears. This is about becoming a man with integrity, direction, and self-respect, because that's the foundation of a meaningful life. When a man builds himself around approval, relationships become the center of his identity. He looks to others to validate his worth, to give him purpose, to make him feel complete. That creates pressure, imbalance, and dependency. And women feel that weight immediately. The man we've been describing doesn't live this way. His life has substance outside of romance. He is committed to his own growth, his work, his values, and his direction. Relationships become an addition, not a rescue. Ironically, this is what makes him attractive, not because he's trying to be, but because his life already has structure and meaning. People are drawn to those who are engaged with their own existence. So this isn't about being remembered by women, it's about becoming someone worth knowing, someone grounded, intentional, and alive. Everything else is simply a byproduct of that choice.